Welcome to the 4th season of Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA plus stories. This is Anne-Marie Zanzel, your host, and I am so excited to share some changes to our podcast that are really great, and I think you'll be as excited as I am about it. First of all, we will be dropping a new podcast every other Friday. This is at the request of our listeners who wanted to hear more. Secondly, my producer, Barb Rowlandson, will be joining me as a conversation partner as we discuss things coming out. Barb is a fellow late-in lifer and also the mom of a queer kid, and so she has a lot of insight and experience to share with us. And thirdly, we're going to be focusing also on the beyond. Love to hear your coming out stories, but I want to hear the beyond. Sometimes magical things happen when we come out and we have a life that we could have never imagined. Many of us say this is the best thing that we've ever done. So let's get started. Welcome to the show. Tell me your story. Hi, I would love to welcome Jennifer Boudrye today. She is the founder of Parent With Care LLC, which she helps parents of LGBTQ plus youth, teens, and young adults to understand, connect with, and celebrate their kiddos through one-on-one and group coaching, workshops, and presentations. Jennifer brings a myriad of experiences to her coaching. She is the Safe Zone trained Gender and Sexuality Alliance, GSA, faculty advisor, a certified coach through the, how do you say it, JI Institute?
JI.
Yeah.
Yep.
A certified coach through the JI Institute for Parenting, the education director for Equality Loudoun, an LGBTQ plus advocacy nonprofit in Loudoun County, Virginia. It's Equality Loudoun. And she facilitates a parent support group for the Ryan Bartel Foundation, a nonprofit working to end teen suicide. As the founder of Parent With Care, Jennifer is committed to helping parents develop and implement compassion, awareness, respect, and empathy in their parenting. She most enjoys supporting parents through the turbulent teen years, but she recognizes that if her parents had the necessary tools, she might not have had such a hellion in her teens. Jennifer is the parent of 3 adult children, one of whom is bisexual, and the bonus parent to a transgender man who is dad to an adorable 1-year-old. She has unique personal experience, perspective, and an understanding of parents of LGBTQ plus youth and the paths they take alongside their kids' journey. Jennifer lives in North Virginia, close enough to DC to enjoy all of it has to offer, but far enough away to escape most of the traffic. When she's not researching, writing, or coaching parents, Jennifer recharges by going to concerts or mindlessly scrolling in search of the perfect house with gorgeous mountain views and a welcoming front porch swing. Welcome, Jennifer. It is so nice to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Well, me too. And by the way, that would be my dream house too. So tell me, Jennifer, I ask all my guests, so tell me your story.
Yeah, so it's a long story, so I'm going to make it as short as possible. Way back in the beginning when I had children, I realized that I wanted to parent differently than my parents did.
Mm-hmm.
They essentially stopped parenting me at 10 when they divorced. So flash forward, I had taken all kinds of coursework and all of that around child psych and yada, yada. And I had 3 kids pretty close together. My girls are 16 months apart, and then my son. And I realized I had no idea what I was doing. So parenting classes, moms groups, all the support possible. In 1996, like at the beginning of the internet, I had started hosting and producing a radio talk show that was focused on parenting issues. So it was my first opportunity to really serve parents. Flash forward again, became a school librarian because I wanted to work with the same schedule as my kids had. So I worked as a school librarian for 17 plus years. 4 of which I was the director of library programs for DC public schools. And I got to a point where I'm like, oh, next chapter, ready to figure out the thing. And I had also, and after I did the radio show, I had created an internet resource directory for families in Montgomery County, Maryland. So I kept that going for a while. So I'm sitting here, next chapter of life. What have I always been passionate about? And the last few years of working as a school librarian, I became really involved with LGBTQ plus advocacy and a lot of DEIB work. And so those issues are very, very important to me, not just as the parent of and bonus parent of queer people, but seeing kids. And I'd spent a lot of time working with parents whose kids were coming out or who were transitioning, who were just like, I didn't know what this is, and helping to bridge the gaps of understanding. So I realized that the thing that I really enjoy doing was working with parents to help them understand their kids. So I went and got a certification in parent coaching, and Jai's focus is peaceful parenting. And so all of the things kind of work together. So here I am now working to help parents. And I really do believe that the only way we're going to save the world and, make it a truly safe space for the queer community is starting with parents, getting them to understand so that we can provide truly safe spaces for kids.
Wow, that is incredibly interesting, and especially the beginning of the internet. And I would really love to ask you about all the book banning right now, but we're not going to focus on your librarian.
Do another one. Happy to chat about that.
They are feisty people. Don't ever cross a librarian because
do not.
Do not. So tell me about first of all, I'm really curious. What is your typical parent that reaches out to you? Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, so typical parent is someone who believes that they're an ally, believe that they were going to be open and supportive no matter what. And then the reality hit home and they're terrified, or they're terrified of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, or they want to be supportive, but they don't understand. Sometimes we have to start with basic terminology, right? What is LGBTQIA? What does all of that mean? Separating the difference between gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, getting them to really connect with the fact that the kid that they have is still the kid they have always had. They just have new information. And so how does that shift? So the process that we go through is compassion is the desire to help. Right. And as parents, we always want to fix. We always want to save. We want to protect our kids. But it's coming from our perspective. Right. So compassionate parenting is really about what's best for your kid and what your kid needs. Then the awareness piece is all of the education. The respect is understanding that there are boundaries, that you and your child are on different paths for this same journey. And your kid gets to be the leader. And that's hard for a lot of parents. And then the empathy piece is really the fact that as a cisgender heterosexual woman, I am never going to understand what it is to be queer. And I don't have to understand it. I just have to be able to sit with people who are struggling. And my role as an ally is to take the arrows and then step aside and amplify the person's voice behind me so that they're next to me.
So when a parent comes to you and they think that they're an ally, I would really like to talk about what you mean by that, because I understand what you mean. Before I came out, I thought I was I defined myself as an ally, and I was to a certain extent, but I got a lot of things wrong. And what do you like when your parents come to you? What really is interesting to me is with working with people coming out later in life. And so later in life is self-defined. So my youngest clients are 25. I mean, so, and I have people 75 plus, but a lot of them are very surprised that their very progressive parents are having a hard time. So can you talk more about that?
So I think, I talk a lot about as soon as you find out that you're having a child coming into your world, whether it's, you're giving birth or adopting a child, you automatically have a vision of who and what that child is going to be. Right. And especially in our very, very heteronormative, binary gendered world, we think this is what it's going to be. And I often tell the story of a friend who was, I'm just gonna let it out there. This is my bonus son, who is trans, and his wife is cis, and they were pregnant and got the sonogram one day and was, oh, it's a boy. And I literally, my first thought was, is it?
Did you say it out loud?
I did.
Oh, good
So
for you.
sometimes I don't filter. So we had a conversation. It's like, yeah, you're having a child with a penis. It might be a boy, but like you have own people, he transitioned at 25, 26.
Mhm.
We know better, right? But it's so incredibly ingrained in us. And
Well,
so,
yeah, and it's conditioned, right? I mean,
yeah,
you
it
see
is.
as a new parent, you see a penis on a ultrasound, you say,
Mhm.
oh, it's a boy,
It's a
and
boy. And
yeah.
then all of your visions of boyness are what they are. And so I think parenting, regardless of whether we're dealing with a kid who is queer or not, the hardest thing about parenting is letting go and realizing that this person is an actual unique individual unto themselves,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
get to decide who they're going to be. And so it really is, it's parents who are progressive. They might have been supporting, they might be out there at the pride parades and supporting and doing all of that. But then when it comes home, it's what?
Personal. It's personal.
Personal. And and I also tell the story of my son, I knew was gay.
Mhm.
In college, he came out as bi, and I am of the era of pick a team. I
Right.
didn't understand bi, right? And so I had to learn and get to know it. And
Mhm.
as your understanding grows, then you can truly be that ally. The
Mhm.
other piece I do deal with often is people who are more resistant coming from a faith background. And so that's another place where we have to work through and, get to the point of reality, especially for Christianity, which is love, period.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Well, and how do you work with those people that are coming from a more faith-based objective or perceived faith-based objective to for
yeah,
someone being LGBTQ?
I always come at it with the approach of help me understand.
Okay.
What messages did you get? When did you first find out that queer people existed? And
Mhm.
how did you find that out? What was the messaging behind that?
Mhm.
And then we sort of just deconstruct it, right? And then
Mhm.
looking at their own child, and who is this person that you have raised that you love?
Mhm. Mhm. Um, when, when parents come to you now, which my wife came out in 1985. So, and so she was an old Southern Baptist girl. She's from the South. And she said they were like, you can't be gay when I was growing up, but it's not like it is now, in which, people's own people's own uh existential life or their own, they will go to hell if they accept their gay children, which sometimes they get in the churches that they are in. How do you deconstruct that?
Sometimes I have to put the religious perspective in another place, and I
Mhm.
go to the really real realities of mental health and
Mhm.
safety.
Mhm.
And it's, if you want your kid to be safe and you want them to stay alive in this world, this is
Mhm.
what has to happen.
Mhm. When you talked about boundaries before, can you say a little bit more about that and what you meant about
Yeah.
that?
I think a couple of different things come up often. One is parents that want to emote and feel all of their feelings and feel them and express them with their child,
Mhm.
or ask all of the information from their child. And understanding that the boundary has to be, you can get your education elsewhere. We can get all of the information, come to a coach, right? We can help you get all of that you need. And also, all of your feelings are completely valid because they're your feelings, and feelings are valid. However, your child is not the person to carry that burden, ever,
Absolutely not. And
ever.
Yeah, I've worked in with trans people, and I've been in trans Facebook groups and stuff like that. And one of the things I hear most, even if the child's 35 when they're coming out, they cannot carry the they cannot carry the emotional burden uh,
Absolutely not.
of your parents. So, for example, a lot of times trans individuals will often grieve that child very, very intensely because they thought they were going to have a daughter their entire lives. And in fact, they have a son. And a lot of times too, what I have found, I have a non-binary and / trans child. And it's what I have found. It's a grief of like, there's a loss there, but they were not the person that I could talk to about that. Luckily, I knew enough not to do that.
Yeah, it's
But
hard.
because people don't understand, I mean,
Mm-mm.
you have to find other mothers or fathers of trans children to understand because, like, so for example, now when people ask me how many children I have, I used to say 2 girls, 2 boys. And now I say I have one daughter, one non-binary children, one non-binary child, and 2 sons. And so my language has changed, and it is and also like gendering my child when I gendering them the wrong way because they use they them pronouns, and I'm used to using their other pronouns before
Mhm.
before they came out as non-binary. It has been it is like I have first of all, I understand as a parent myself, and it is but there's some grief to it that people don't understand, and unless you can find a community that gets it, or a coach that gets it, people don't get
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
they don't. They
Yeah.
don't. And again, it's one of those things where it is, you are now part of a different community,
Mhm.
and you have to seek that. And I think there are some amazingly wonderful, supportive online groups that people can join, and in-person groups. The difference with the coaching is sometimes it's, I need help with my specifics, right? Dedicated time, dedicated action. And that's why I work. The other place that I find people need to understand respect is that, again, your child gets to lead through this. And so let's say you are to a point where you are so excited, you are really ready to celebrate the world and let everyone know, but your kid is not. That means you don't get to share it, period, until they're ready.
Right. You
Right. And
can't out your
so,
child if they're not ready to share
exactly.
this news. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things, I watch TV shows all the time, and one of the things that like I that like makes me cringe now when I hear, see somebody come out to mom and dad on a TV show, and the parent says, you know, I will love you no matter what, and things like that. And because and I know you understand why I cringe, but
Mhm.
what are some of the things you should and shouldn't say? And there's also like, so we're talking about also very different coming outs too, because the LGBTQIA plus community is very large and very diverse. So a child coming out as lesbian is very different than someone who's coming out as trans, who's different than someone that's coming out as non-binary, as different than as someone who's coming out as bisexual. So and plus,
All the combinations of
if you don't know any of those terms, it literally is overwhelming because
them.
honestly, you're entering into a new world that most of us who have lived in a compulsory heterosexual society don't know much about. And,
Yeah.
and so here you are, your kids entering this new world, and they're using language that you've never heard before. What are your do you do do's and don'ts, or do you phrase it something else? I
I,
can't.
I, I mean, we kind of work it in, right? But your first example is just, I love you.
Mhm,
That's it. No buts, no matter what, like, I love you.
mhm,
The other thing I think that parents need to do is thank you.
mhm,
Thank you for trusting me enough
mhm,
to tell me, right? A lot of parents start to get, I've been so open. I can't believe they didn't tell me, all this time. They've known since they were 4 and now they're 17. And okay, you didn't know, right? We can look back and kind of see some of the messaging, why the kid didn't feel safe, or maybe the kid didn't really know, right? Like that. None of those things matter. Here you are right now with your child. You love your kid. So I love you. Thank you. What do you need from me? Because they just might need you to listen. They might need you to share with their other parent on their behalf. They may need you to run interference at school. So find out what they need and just listen, right? Then I also get into parents want to know details about things that are none of their business, really, and I understand where the questioning comes in, and the curiosity comes in, but I think you need to be able to accept that this is again, a private journey that your child is on, and you don't get to know all the things. And so you can ask open-ended questions. I'm curious to know, tell me more about, help me understand. But then that's the respect piece also, where is the, if the kid isn't wanting to share certain things.
Well, it's the boundary piece too.
Yeah.
And it's, I think a lot of times too, it's curiosity, human curiosity. We know what happens. Like if you identify as straight, or you did at some point, we sort of know what happens in those relationships. So we don't ask questions about that. But a lot of times parents don't know what happens in queer relationships. And so they ask just out of curiosity. And I really love the point you made, Jennifer, because sometimes, first of all, the advice you gave, I love you, thank you, how can I support you, is universal. Whether whether your child's telling you or your best female friend is telling you, that she's thinks she might be a lesbian, I think I'm going to steal that and I'm going to use that.
The more of us that are doing it, the better.
Yeah, I love it. It's a real universal truth. I love you. Thank you. How can I support you? But one of the questions I have, which is really, so you can answer this or not answer this. This was something that happened with myself and other people I know. When your child identifies as lesbian or gay, and they want to have a guy friend over or a girlfriend over, what's your advice for that? Because I have been in those circumstances and I'm like, okay, I know what to do. And you're like, what have you told parents? I'm really curious about that.
So the first thing that I say is, okay, so now your kid is queer. Guess what? They were queer before you knew. Right? So they've been having sleepovers and you didn't know, but now you know. So you have to change the rules, perhaps. This is where people have to really dig deep and figure out why they have the rules that they have, right? So I think people get very hung up on heterosexual couples as teenagers shouldn't be sleeping together because, oh my God, they might get pregnant. Okay. So if pregnancy is not the issue, then what is the issue? And I think it's a really great opportunity for parents to have very open, honest conversations about their values and the reality that sex and intimate contact has so much more to do with possible pregnancy, right? And figure out where you fit as a family. There is no one rule, right?
Right. There's no one size fits all.
There's no one size fits all. What I will say is be consistent, right? If you're not going to let your heterosexual child have their significant person sleep over, then the same goes for your queer kid, because that's just the rule for the family.
And it's also fair for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's got to be equitable. But it really does come down to family values, but understand why you have those values. It's an opportunity to question, why do I care about this? And not saying you shouldn't. I am by no means saying let them all sleep together. That because there's a lot of emotional stuff going on. But again, hopefully you're having those conversations, period, because if they're going to do it, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
with or without your permission, right?
Right.
So having those conversations about consent and respect, right? So if you decide that within your family structure, it's going to be fine for, let's have a group sleepover, but everybody's going to be in the same open space, and I'm
Mhm.
going to be walking through repeatedly. And if I see, sleeping bags zipped together, I'm going to unzip them, and that's going to be awkward for you. So perhaps don't do that, right? Then lay down the rules and make sure they know what the consequences are going to be. But then really truly be able to have the conversation and about consent, and again, respect, like respect the fact that you are in a family home, right? I don't want to necessarily hear that. So I'm like, you're my kid. So, it's respect again, both ways. But I think it's a great opportunity for parents to have open conversations about values.
Mhm. So when parents come to you, they're often just really seeking guidance then. So when should a parent seek your support?
As soon as they go, what is this? Truly, even if you have suspicion that your kid might be coming out, or if you just want to understand what this is in preparation for, or your kid has come out and you don't know what that is going to mean for them, right? I say I take people from a place of fear, confusion, perhaps sadness, and
Mhm.
help them shift to become affirming, vocal allies for
Mhm.
their kiddos. And
Mhm.
then, so we get through the grieving piece, through all of the feelings, and they understand it. How do you really advocate for your kid? Like, what, sometimes we're working around, this situation is happening at school. What can we do here? How can
Mhm.
I, what information do you need? I was working with someone who had older children and wanted to ask questions. So I'm like, okay, let's frame these in a way that are going to be respectful. Or, you know, another parent is not going to be supportive.
Mhm.
So how do you divide and conquer as an adult? How do you compartmentalize so that you can support your kid while you're dealing with the other relationships that you have? So it's a lot of problem solving.
So as we both know, our trans children are taking such an enormous hit lately, and my heart goes out
Yeah.
to trans families. Um, I don't know. I just want to say that I love them so much, and I am so grieved that governments are trying to get between a child and their doctor, and a child and their mom and dad, or their parents, because not everybody has a mom and dad. Some people have moms, some people has dads. Some people have non-binary folks. But they're caretakers who love them. And so, what if a parent just realizes that their child is transgender? Because not everybody figures it out when they're 4. Sometimes, kids are 16, 17, sometimes they're 35. Um, what kind of advice, especially in the climate that we're dealing with right now, do you give to your trans parents that come your way?
Understanding that the fear is legitimate.
It is legitimate.
It is 100% legitimate. And so this is where sometimes the librarianing comes in. So, like, I will help them find resources in their local area because I work with people all over the country. Where can we get safe places for
Mhm.
them, safe people for them to talk to? It's not always there, right? So what is the plan? What is going to keep your kiddo safe and allow them to be who they are? And again, that's going to be a very personal journey for each family. Some families may have to move.
Mhm.
Some families may have to, figure out how to keep it under the radar and still support their kid, but have to do things to keep them safe. Right. And it's
Mhm.
depending on the age of the child, you may have to be able to explain to them, listen, I am terrified for you, or in certain states now, parents can go to jail
Mhm.
if, they can lose their kids. So it's real. Um, it's a lot of listening too and being that empathetic partner.
Mhm.
And it because it's real. And I cannot emphasize enough the value and the need for people to get involved politically, especially those of us with the privilege of being cisgender and heterosexual. That is, we have to vote. We have to be out there, because it is beyond egregious and horrifying. So there's not always a lot that I can do other than listen and provide resources and information.
So one thing I would love for you to do, Jen, when we're done with this, is if we can, maybe, I'm sure your website has all these resources and stuff at that we make sure, I don't know if it's on our little form you filled out, but if I would love to connect with you and have those resources,
Oh, yeah.
especially for our parents who may be listening to the show and realize that they have a trans child, or may suspect they might have a trans child, because a lot of times moms and dads know sometimes before the kids know.
And sometimes, it could be also that the parents that you're working with, or the people that you're working with whose parents are still not understanding, right? That's
yeah.
You work with the people coming out, I'll work with their parents.
Well,
We
and
can get everybody on board.
well, and sometimes it's one and the same, sometimes, I mean, I have heard of queer couples rejecting a trans child, which like blows my mind to no end.
I always say, like, so I've got, I have the the bisexual child and the transgender child. And it's like, I've got both of the most extremely marginalized letters under the rainbow. And it's real. I mean, they both have dealt with a lot of challenges.
Well, yeah. And for those of us, I mean, for those of you who are listening, I mean, for bisexual, the bisexuals are the invisible letter, and the LGBTs are a little bit more prominent now than they used to be. But bisexuals are like, there is something called in the queer community called bi invisibility, and it is a real thing. And so, and oftentimes too, bi men and bi women will get rejected by lesbians and gay men, because of a whole host of reasons, which we don't have to go into right now, but basically people are afraid. And so it's a real thing. And so there's even, it's so funny because they think, a lot of times people think that the queer community is a monolith, but we're not at all. We have no agenda whatsoever. Just trying to get through life and joy, and maybe be happy.
Be able to live.
Fall in love, raise our children the way we want to. And it's for our trans brothers and sisters and non-binary folks, to have them be able to live their lives how they were created to be. That's really our agenda. That's about it.
That's it. And the other thing is that once I it's interesting because my niche is parents of LGBTQ plus kids, teens, young adults. But then once we get through that piece, it's like, oh, right, you still have to parent this kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
we then are like, okay, it's yes and, right? Beyond
absolutely. Yeah.
Seeing who they are.
So at the end of this show, I always ask people what their coming out song is. And I am curious, Mama, do you have any coming out songs, or do you have any coming out? I just thought of this. Do you have any coming out songs for your bi and trans kids?
I'd have to think about that one for a while.
Okay, I won't put you on the spot.
Mine is Red Dress by Maya Sharp, who is an amazing indie artist. And you got to listen to the lyrics very carefully, and you'll hear, my rebellious teenage self gesturing to society. And I also asked, do you have like a favorite book or movie that you watched or read, and it just sort of changed your perspective on everything, or like really opened your eyes? This is a hard one for me because, as having been a school librarian, I read so much, especially, young adult literature. So I really have a hard time identifying one. But I will say, when I started out as a school librarian, there were no books around, LGBTQ people. And when I left, literally, we couldn't buy a book that didn't have a queer character. And so that art I think is more the arc of the genres that changed me and my perspective, and seeing the kids needing desperately and being able to buy all of the books that they needed. Was wonderful.
Were you already, did you know your child was gay at that time?
Oh,
You
yeah.
kn- Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What's your favorite young adult queer book? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I can't. Yes. There are literally a million titles flying through my head. So I can't pick
Yeah,
one.
pick one. It's like asking me to pick what kid is the favorite, right?
Yes.
You're like, I
It
can't
is.
do that, Anne-Marie. What are you, crazy?
There's so many, so many.
You
I
know,
really,
can I tell you something really interesting? Some of
please.
my later in life lesbians that are like in their 50s and 60s have read queer young adult novels, and it has been so helpful for
Oh,
them.
yeah.
There was one that one of my clients that was like in her mid 60s read. It was about two girls coming of age, like in the late 50s, early 60s, and one, and which was well, I guess she would be a little younger. I mean, she's a little younger than that, but it really resonated with her because she had a girlfriend all through high school and college, the same person, but they never ended up together because they just didn't think they could. She came from a
Yeah.
Catholic background, and the girl both got married to men, but she ended up coming out later in life. And so that book, I have to figure out what it was, but it deeply, deeply resonated with her. I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much. They're really, and I love reading young adult stuff, even though I'm not a school librarian anymore.
Well, the funny thing is when I was a young adult, they didn't like, I know that Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is out now. And are you going to go see that? Because that was like something I read when I was
Yep.
that age. But like they didn't have those novels. So like for me, I really have to go. I'm just going to go to the banned book list for like Alabama or Tennessee. Go read all those.
All of those. Absolutely.
How do you describe your life today now that you've done your pivot and you're working with people who really need your help?
Yeah. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I am actually able to make an impact that is going to, have a larger impact. I mean, being a school librarian was wonderful. Raising 3 amazing kids was wonderful. But this is something that it's sort of, I have my life philosophy is everything happens when and as it should.
Yeah,
and I feel like right now, this is what I need to be doing. So it's really, really satisfying when I am able to literally change people's lives by just helping them love their kid and understand their kid, and knowing that that is going to change, that's going to resonate for generations.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It will resonate for generations.
Mhm.
Well, Jennifer from Parent With Care, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
enjoyed this conversation. And in our show notes today, we will have how you can reach Jennifer if she sounds like somebody you need to contact, and maybe get some of the lists you talked about and, like for the groups, because really, if you are a trans parent or a queer parent of children right now and finding community of other people, and people always mention PFLAG, which is a great organization, but there's a lot of other ones out there. And it's really nice to connect with other parents who understand it. And no shame, no shame, and just go connect with other parents who understand.
Absolutely.
It is life-giving. It truly is.
Yeah.
So, all right, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on this show today.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA plus stories with Anne-Marie Zanzel. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzel.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzel.com.